Hi folks, I'm Chris Marshall with Woodworker's Journal magazine. When it comes to making cross cuts or angled cuts, miter saws are some of the handiest power tools we have for our DIY projects in woodworking. And straight out of the box, you can get pretty decent results from your cuts, but they do have one Achilles heel, and that's tear out. Here's what I mean by tear out. When you either lower the blade through a cut or push it through, depending on the kind of saw you have, you get splintering along the back of the board here or along the bottom here. Now, tear out isn't a big deal if you're framing walls with 2x4s. Splintering on the edges of those cuts makes absolutely no difference at all. But it's a much bigger deal for precision woodworking. You don't want splintering along the edges of your miter cuts when you're making a picture frame like this, installing delicate moldings on a jewelry box, or hanging crown around a built-in. In those situations, it's unsightly and unacceptable. So what do you do about tear out? Well, in this short video, I'm going to give you 4 quick and easy tips to take your miter saw's performance to the next level. You don't have to settle for ragged edges anymore. Here's what to do. Here's tip number 1. Choose the right blade for the job. The standard blades that come on some miter saws, particularly budget price saws like this one, are general purpose. They'll have around 40 teeth, widely spaced, and they're intended for making quick cuts on framing materials like 2x4s. For that job, they work fine. But are they precision cutting blades? Not really. For the cleanest possible cuts, choose a blade that has more teeth, like the 60-tooth blade that comes on this Craftsman saw here. Compared to this general purpose blade, 60 or more teeth, spaced more closely together, take much smaller bites of wood, and that reduces splintering. Here's tip number 2, and it's fall out of bed simple. If your blade isn't cutting well, try cleaning it. When we cut wood, the blade develops enough heat to melt pitch deposits in the wood, and those get baked onto the blade over time. Let me show you the brown, burnt-on evidence here on this blade. These baked-on deposits won't come off the teeth on their own. They just keep building up, making the blade run hotter, and that can shorten its life. And this crusty stuff dulls their cutting action, creating tear out in the wood, just like a dull scissors tears paper. So buy some blade cleaner and give your miter saw blade a good scrubbing when it starts to look dirty. A citrus-based blade cleaner like this works quickly for softening the crud so you can scrub it off. Concentrated laundry detergent also works surprisingly well for cleaning blades, but don't use oven cleaner. It's way too caustic for carbide and can actually ruin it over time. Either way, let the blade soak for about 20 minutes and then scrub it with a brass or plastic bristle brush. Then rinse it clean and dry it off thoroughly to prevent rust. Put it back on your miter saw and you can expect some real improvement in cutting performance. So let's say you've chosen a good blade for precision cutting and it's nice and clean, and still you're getting tear out. What else can you try? Well, here's tip number 3. Close the gaps. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, when you make a cut, does the saw support the wood right up to the point where the blade enters it? No. Typically, this throat plate has a pretty wide gap, and that gap allows the saw to tip one way or the other for making beveled cuts. A wide gap keeps the blade from cutting it. But that gap doesn't support the wood underneath, and when the blade comes through, it splinters on the bottom. Here's the other gap, right here between these fences. When the blade pushes through, it breaks out the wood on the back edge, resulting in tear out. So for your most precise cuts, you have to cover these gaps. You might be able to close up the throat plate by loosening these adjustment screws and sliding the throat plate together. Some saws have that feature, but if yours doesn't, cover the gap with a piece of thick tape, or even better, Cover it with a thin piece of plywood. It'll really help. And to close up the gap on the fence, just place a strip of scrap material against the fence behind the board you want to cut. Then cut through them both at the same time. This way, the cut is supported completely from behind, so the blade can't splinter the back edge of the wood at all. And with both gaps closed up, the saw cuts almost surgically clean. That's what you want. If you use a sliding compound miter saw, you might have even experienced some tear out along the top of your workpiece, like this. That's because as you push the carriage through, the blade is rotating up and out of the cut on the back side, lifting the wood fibers as it goes. So to remedy the problem, here's tip number 4. Score along your cut line first with a sharp utility knife. Then, line up the edge of the blade carefully so the teeth just intersect your score line and make the cut. If you line it up carefully, the top of your cut line should be as clean as the bottom. All miter saws, whether they're affordable models like this or those that cost several car payments, are going to make ragged cuts every now and again. It's the nature of the beast. But don't let tear out ruin your project. Just remember my 4 tips. Choose the right blade, keep it clean, close the gaps and score first, and watch your results improve. Enjoy your miter saw, and thanks for watching.